Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of Unfiltered and Functional. I am your host, Mandy. I'm here with my bestie, Sashi.
Hello.
Please ignore my wild hair and my glasses. I'm going through it. No, freshly washed hair, so it's out of control. Glasses because something got in my eye yesterday and like I said, I'm going through it. But
One of those days. You look cute though. It's okay. You can pull it
thank
off.
you. Thank you. It definitely is one of those days for my cornea. Uh, but today we've got a quick little episode for you. And this is something, even if you are not in the bodybuilding space, I think is going to be beneficial to hear because it is still applicable to any sort of fitness journey or weight loss journey or even muscle building journey. But because I am currently in prep, I did want to briefly talk about how to set a functional foundation for your prep to be a little bit more successful. What I mean by that is, everyone thinking about like a prep, you talk about macros and how much you're eating, you talk about how much cardio you're doing, like what kind of fat burners are you on, like peak week, show day, all that exciting stuff. But nobody ever stops to be like, wait, is my body actually physiologically healthy enough to support the stress of getting stage lean? Because you are getting unnaturally lean. And that is a huge stressor to the body. Arguably, the healthier you are before you start that prep, the sport is not healthy. But if you're healthier before you start the prep, you're going to have better chances coming out of that prep with a little bit more optimal foundation to make reversing easier, to make your next growth season easier, or to make whatever you choose to do with your life after that easier. A couple of the things that I've personally done after I share them, I want to open up for you, Sash, to also share that because arguably your last show, how you prepped for it was much different than what you did for the previous shows that you've done.
Yeah.
So, and same here. For this show, how I have gotten ready for it is I actually had like a 3 year off season. And in that time span, I did spend it growing, but I also got lab work done. And this is something non negotiable. Like you should be getting lab work done in your off season to fix whatever needs to be fixed, to improve whatever needs to be proved, not 2 weeks before you start prep. Because at that point, we really can't do shit about it, except as a coach. If that coach has your health in mind, as a coach, I would be like, hey, you're not in a good place to start this if your labs don't support it. Like, we're not, if you're already in a bad place, we're not going to make it worse and trash your health. That might take, honestly, several years to come back from. So, first non negotiable is making sure your lab work is in a good place. And if it's not, then continuing your off season to address that. Something else I did after my first shows, my gut was fucked. Not everyone is going to need this. And the better you prepare for a prep functionally before the actual prep, before doing a severe deficit, before doing a severe surplus, because surplus will also cause gut dysfunction. Not always, but if you don't do it correctly, looking at you, male bodybuilders, eating 5,000 calories a day, my gut was wrecked after my first show, and I went through a gut protocol to fix the overgrowths and to fix the deficient good bacteria that I had. And my immune system was trashed, absolutely trashed. So if you are somebody that is having gut dysfunction before you want to prep, that needs to be addressed.
Yeah.
Prep is a stressor. It is going to mess with your gut health, period. The other thing I've done is nervous system practices. I've spoken before about how I spent essentially my entire life in a sympathetic dominant state, which essentially means like fight or flight is default mode for me, especially coming from like surgical trauma. We were like always go, 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 save a life, get the
Mm-hmm.
ambu bag, transfuse the blood, cut the brain, like do the things. Um,
Cut the brain is crazy.
I should have said cut the skull or like cut the scalp. My goodness. I'm just
That's crazy too, but I get it. That's what I'm saying. Like
I um
my
uh,
nervous system can't handle that. I would crash out. Thinking about it makes me nervous.
it's yeah, is wild. Sometimes I'm I'm not gonna lie, sometimes I miss it, but I know. It's because
Don't get on, note to self, don't get on Mandy's bad side because she will cut your brain.
scalp
Scalp.
and then
It's
bone.
and then bone and then
Yep.
brain.
Yes. Well, optimally not going to cut the brain, but if there is blood there, we will take it off. Anyway,
Ugh,
I can still like walk through all the steps of how to do a craniotomy, but I digress. The point being, having spent so much of my life in that like high stress state, prep is also a high stress state for your body physiologically. I sound like I'm beating a dead horse. It is stressful for your body. If your cortisol isn't in a good place, if your nervous system isn't in a good place, like you shouldn't start a prep. The prep will trigger your nervous system. It is going to make you a little bit more stressed out. It challenges you. That's why people kind of are drawn to it and they like doing it. It is a challenge mentally and physically. Now, for this prep, from a functional standpoint, I've taken a much better care of my nervous system. I pay attention to my HRV. I pay attention to my recovery. And if it's not there, I'm not pushing in the gym because what I've learned about my body is if I push through what I don't have in energetic stores, it takes me even longer to recover. Now, thankfully, I'm in a good place. Recovery is good. I actually only lift 4 days a week. My last prep, I was doing 6 days a week. So I found a nice balance there. And as far as like nervous system practices, I am stretching, I am doing breath work, I am reading, I am putting strict boundaries on screen time, all of those things. Cardio, I'm also not doing the stairs. No more 60-minute plus cardio sessions on the Stairmaster.
yeah.
That was wrecking my body. So, and my nervous system. So these are things that sounds kind of stupid, but from a functional health standpoint, like it will make your prep that much physically easier for you.
Yeah.
Or like I said, if your lifestyle, if you want to do like a big deficit, if you have a lot of weight to lose, looking at your labs beforehand, making sure your nervous system's in a good place, making sure your gut's in a good place. These are all things that are going to make weight loss easier or building muscle easier. So, Sash, can you share a little bit with us about how you prepared a little bit differently for your most recent show days versus your first early show days?
Yeah, I mean, you pretty much hit the nail on the head with all of the things that you said that you did. There were a couple additional things that I did during my prep that I'm planning to do even better in my next prep because we live and we learn. But in a nutshell, for my first ever prep, there was no prepping beforehand. It was like I just went to the gym, I trained, I got blood work, like technically when I had already been starting prep, kind of in a way. Um, Fun fact, I actually didn't even start tracking my food with a food scale until I started prep. So, needless to say, all of that changed. I track food in my off season. I track food in my cut season. I track food. I always put food on a food scale now. So like that's not even negotiable. Um, I don't want to sound like a broken record and repeat everything you said, but like in my most recent prep, like yes, blood work, got it done multiple times. Made sure to fix what was going on. I actually, fun fact, you know this, but the people don't. I did a gut flush with Mandy during my growth season because there was a point where I wanted to start a prep, but my body was just fighting me and I could not. I started doing Stairmaster. I started doing a deficit. I started doing a calorie deficit, everything. I could not drop a pound. I was just so inflamed. And I look back at those pictures and I was very inflamed, very inflamed. So we did a gut flush for 2 or 3 weeks, I believe. That helped tremendously. And also, like before starting my prep, like I let myself live life and live it in a very healthy and good way. Like we went on trips, we traveled. I didn't stress about having an outside meal because I knew that, we were gonna lock in. We were always locked in, but like I let myself live a little bit because I knew what prep was going to require from me. But the biggest thing that I did going into my last prep that I'm planning to improve even more in my next one is cutting out a lot of toxic people in my life, setting very, very strict and firm boundaries. really taking a good look at what was messing with my nervous system. Literally, this was my nervous system that was just fired away. And this is something that I only plan to improve in my next one because unfortunately, for a couple of the circumstances, like there were some things that were happening during my last prep with just like personal relationships, with family relationships, where it kind of like the cords got cut between my first and my second show. So I only really had a month in between that time to like gather myself essentially. That was difficult in itself, but like I let myself be very selfish during my last prep. And I am so beyond grateful that my fiance was so understanding and was so supportive of it that I didn't even feel like I was being selfish because it was like, yeah, this is what you have to do. This is what you signed up for. And if anything, like he kicked my butt. Like when I didn't place the way that I wanted to at my first show of my last season, because I competed in 2 shows last year, he literally texted me when I was doing my fasted cardio and I told him I was like, I am having such a hard time. Like I'm just like mentally like having a hard time like believing in myself for the next show and just having a moment. He sent me a message where he was like, I love you and I feel like you really need to hear this. Like, let the fact that you didn't qualify be the fire that you need right now. Like, let this, like, he wasn't no, like, oh, it's okay, baby. No, he was like, I know you and I know you need to hear some tough love right now. And this was very different than in my first prep because, and even when I pulled out of a prep when I was trying, I remember it was really difficult for me to pull out of that and make that decision because I'm a person who follows through no matter how hard it is, and I will push myself. And I remember when I came up to my family, I was like in tears, like telling them because I felt so disappointed in myself, even though my body was just not re responding. And my family took it in a way of like, good, like you don't need to do that anyways. Like that's not good for like, and it kind of just made me feel like you don't hear me. Like I am having a really hard time doing this right now, pulling out, and I'm very disappointed. So like there was a lot of self-reflecting and approaching people's opinions of me, how people think of me, what people think of me, like putting all of that just not even on the back burner, like it is on no burner. It is just
Mhm.
not existent, not important to me. And yeah, that was like probably one of the biggest differences besides everything that you've mentioned that I did and just like really taking more seriously my sleep, my recovery, tracking everything with my Aura ring, being very, very conscious about my micronutrients. Like that's something that I never paid attention to, like how much sodium, how much potassium am I eating, iron, this, that, the third, the fourth, and like oh my God, I got like the worst Charlie horses of my life in my first ever prep because I was eating like little to no potassium. And in this one, I was like on it, like on it.
And that's the difference too, is in your first prep, if I may.
Yeah, please.
Because, and I can say this, guys who don't know our history, Sasha and I had the same prep coach for our first prep. So I can safely say this because we had very similar experiences. First shows, you were told to take a potassium supplement, whereas,
Yes.
like, and I mean, in some cases, that will have to be done for certain athletes, but ideally, you're getting it from your food.
Yeah. Yeah. Potassium. And that goes to pretty much every supplement that you can get from food. Like even like iron to some extent, like eating more red meat and like vitamins, like
Mhm.
vitamin C and vitamin D and vitamin A. And like if you can
Mhm.
get that from food, get it from food. And that's actually you just brought something up that I completely forgot. Like took potassium and magnesium every night. Like don't get me wrong, I also took a lot of supplements in my last prep. Like I was taking beef liver supplements because I wasn't eating a lot of beef and I still take magnesium and fish oil because I definitely was not consuming enough like fats, like omega fats, and just eating as much
Mhm.
of that. So like there were a handful of supplements and vitamins that I continue taking and still till this day take. But like that just reminded me, like, holy shit, like yeah, I used to take a potassium pill every single day because rather than my coach simply saying like, hey, add more potatoes or hey, add more bananas or like I didn't even have a potassium goal last time. I didn't have a potassium goal. I didn't have a sodium goal. I didn't have oh my God, there were like I didn't
No
have a no
fiber.
certain no fiber goal, no fiber goal. That was something I
Mhm.
figured out for myself because I wasn't pooping every day. No where my heart rate should be at during my cardio. It was just like level this for this long on the Stairmaster, and my
Mhm.
heart rate at points was at like 170
It's
during cardio
insane.
for like 60 minutes. And like
Yeah.
now during my last prep, like it didn't go higher than I think like 150 or like 155, and that was like between 135 and 150 like is where it had to be or something along
Mhm.
those lines. But needless to say, we both started working with different coaches. I think that was also a really big part. And how that ties into our functional health is we started working with coaches who pay attention to that.
Yes.
And we learned more about that. And you only learn when you go through those experiences.
Yeah.
So, not to mention, in my first prep, I lost my period a month into prep and didn't get it back for another 13 months after that. So we're talking about there was no reverse plan. I was 6 weeks post show and I was 1.5 pounds above show weight, 6 weeks post show. I honestly should have just kept competing at that point because like I was so scared to eat food. And my most recent show that I did, the last one, I literally had a breast augmentation 3 weeks later. And like the scale went up, but like it was exactly what we wanted. And I never had since that first ever experience, like I learned so much about myself and my body, like my hunger cues, my hormones, my everything. I got my period back. I lost my period 1 month before I competed last time around, and I got it back 1 month after. Like literally less than like my next month, I
Yeah.
already got my cycle back. And it was regular and it hasn't budged ever since. So like there's a lot of things that I feel like we've both done from the functional perspective, from the functional side of things
Mhm.
that set us up so much, but it also took learning from those experiences. And I think that that's why it's so important that we do share these things, because if there is a single person right now who's listening to this, who's a competitor or who's considering competing or thinking about it and is not doing their homework and just like, when's the quickest time that I can step on stage? Like, I've had to have hard conversations with clients and with prospects about how realistic their timeline is. Because if you're coming to me and you don't even know how many calories you're eating a day and you're not tracking food, you're not stepping on stage in 6 months. Fight me tooth and nail, I'm not putting you on stage. Like that is what my first prep was like, and I will never allow my clients to have that kind of experience. And there are other coaches who will, and shame on them because they're just taking your money. But it's like,
I mean, that's a really good point you make that I didn't when I set out to do this podcast, I didn't even think about that, but you and I did some pretty intentional homework when we went to start working with our next coach. And I would say, and I'm not going to try and speak for you here, but maybe it's the same.
you
When,
probably
when, when we, when I picked the initial coach that we shared, it was more so, oh, like I see this person on Instagram and their physique looks really good and they're an IFBB pro. So like they must know what they're doing. And guys, like just because somebody looks good and just because they are a coach
doesn't mean, oh,
doesn't
doesn't mean they should be
necessarily
a
mean
coach.
that they are a good coach for that particular niche. In this case, I'm talking about specifically prepping for bodybuilding. Um, can be a great coach in other ways, but if you don't know about in-depth health, if you're not telling your competitors to track sodium, to track potassium, to make sure they're pooping every day, to make sure cycle health is okay, if you're not even assessing if they know how to track food, like I picked based off of ooh, flashy, like aesthetic. This person looks great. I want to look like this person. That's what I did the first time. And more intentionally, because I want to bring a great package, because I want to have my card one day, I made sure that whoever I'm going to work with now, I want to be learning from them. I want to make sure they are prioritizing my health. And when I get on stage, I don't have to worry about my electrolytes. I don't have to worry about if I'm going to have a bowel movement that morning on show day,
Yeah.
which if you know, you know, guys, you know.
Yeah, you should
Um,
be.
so I think that's a really good point that you brought up too, is being really intentional with who you work with.
Yeah, because who you work with will essentially determine which way you are going to go in the sport from both a programming standpoint, but also like if they fit you well as a coach, if they take you and your body into consideration. I have unfortunately seen so many clients, even right now, like just like posing clients or prospects who are wanting to switch coaches coming over and being like, yeah, I'm a 130-pound female eating 200 grams of protein a day. And I'm like, he gave you the same plan as he gives his dudes. Like, you should not be doing that in a prep. Like, this is very not healthy. This is very not right. And a lot of the times it is because, oh, well, they're an IFBB pro. They're this. They're so nice. They're so kind. They're so this. They're so that. That doesn't buy a good coach. That doesn't mean you're a good coach. Just because they're an IFBB pro and look good and got their pro cards and put competitors on stage does not mean that they are a good coach. Just because their posing routine looked good on stage does not mean that they could teach you posing. Just because they got their health in check does not mean that they could do that for you. And I personally, like personally right now off the top of my head, could name 5 coaches that I know, not including you and I, that are incredible, phenomenal coaches. Like amazing, who have pro athletes that are not even pros themselves. They're
Hmm.
not even pros themselves because they are a good coach. And they haven't gotten themselves to that place yet because they are building, they're growing their own life circumstances. They've been pouring into their clients, so they put themselves on whatever the case may be.
Hmm.
I know coaches who are not pros and have turned their clients pros because of how good of a coach they are.
Yeah.
So it's like, I think we kind of went off on a tangent about talking about coaches, but like that does play into how you prepare yourself in the functional standpoint
Hmm.
because you can choose a coach who's just going to throw you up on stage to just say that they threw a client up on stage and good luck, Charlie. Let's just see how you're going to do. Or you can have a coach who's going to sit you down and be like, hey, I need at least a minimum of 6 months of working with you and getting to know your body before we can even consider having the conversation of a bodybuilding prep. And those are conversations that I've been having recently.
No, and
Like,
that's great because like your clients are just going to have that much better baseline health, or I should say have an easier time of getting to their baseline
yeah.
health when they reverse after a show. And I mean, I've heard of several coaches. We used to work with a a gal, a young lady who hired a coach and like didn't even ask for blood work, was just like, all right, here's your prep plan. And body's not responding, kept pushing. And it's like, do you do you really want to work with somebody that is going to work against your physiology, not think about your health? Like it,
Give you a cookie cutter plan because that worked for their other clients.
yeah, there's a difference between being a coachable athlete and being a good coach. Sometimes people can be both, but you really
Yeah.
have to do your homework and find out who's going to be a good fit for you, who is educated on health. If you don't know about basic electrolytes, then you have no business putting somebody through a prep. I'm sorry, hot take.
Yeah.
Hot take. But I think that's a really good place to wrap up. Otherwise, we will just tangent away because
Forever.
we do that. But thank you guys for tuning in. If you guys would be so great if you're listening on YouTube, give me a thumbs up. If you're listening on Spotify, please rate 5 stars. I know everybody asks for that, but truly, as a small creator, it really means so much and goes so far for us. I'll also link in our description box down below our Instagrams, which have our links tree if you're interested in working with either of us. And go over to Sculpt Session Sundays to check out Sasha's podcast. Otherwise, guys, we will see you next week on Monday.
Bye.